I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread, but all I could feel was the cold silence pressing against my chest. My parents sat across from me, while relatives laughed around the table. I had just returned home after 8 years in the military. 8 years of sacrifice, loneliness, and sleepless nights, hoping one day my family would finally be proud of me. Instead, my mother slowly put down her fork and whispered words I will never forget. "She may wear that uniform," she said quietly, "but her military blood makes her an outsider to this family." The room went silent. At first, I thought I heard her wrong. My hands froze around my glass. My younger cousin looked down at her plate. My father didn't defend me. He just sighed and nodded, like my mother had spoken some painful truth everyone secretly agreed with. I felt my throat tighten. All my life, I had tried to earn their love. While other daughters were celebrated for becoming teachers or doctors, I was treated like I had embarrassed the family. They hated my military career. They hated the discipline, the independence, the fact that I refused to stay quiet and obedient. "You changed after joining," my father used to tell me. "No," I'd whisper back, "I just stopped being weak." But that night hurt differently, because deep inside, I still wanted them to love me. My older brother leaned back in his chair and smirked. "You chose strangers over your own blood. Don't act shocked now." I stared at him, unable to speak. They had no idea how many nights I cried alone during deployment, no idea how many birthdays I missed, no idea how many times I risked my life believing I was protecting people like them. But what hurt most was realizing my family never saw me as their daughter anymore, just a disappointment in uniform. I excused myself quietly and walked outside before anyone could see the tears rolling down my face. The cold night air hit my skin as I stood alone beside the porch. But what I didn't know that night was that their cruel words were hiding a much darker secret. And before the week ended, everything they believed about me and themselves would completely fall apart. The next morning, I woke up to hear my parents arguing downstairs. At first, I tried ignoring it. Fighting had become normal in our house. But then I heard my name. "She can never find out," my mother whispered sharply. My chest tightened. I stepped closer to the stairs without making a sound. My father sounded nervous. "If she learns the truth now, everything will collapse." Truth? Suddenly, my stomach twisted with fear. I stayed frozen as my mother spoke again. "She was never supposed to come back after the military. We thought she'd stay gone." Those words broke something inside me. I quietly returned to my room, shaking. My mind raced with questions. What truth were they hiding from me? Why did they act like my existence threatened them? That afternoon, I searched through old boxes in the garage, desperate for answers. Most of it was junk, old papers, broken photo frames, faded clothes. But then I found a locked metal box hidden behind dusty blankets, and inside it was my birth certificate. Only it wasn't the same one I'd seen before. A different man's name was listed under father. I stopped breathing. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. The way my father always kept distance from me, the way relatives whispered during family gatherings, the way my mother avoided questions about my childhood. My hands trembled as I read the name again and again. I wasn't my father's biological daughter. Everything around me felt unreal. That evening, I confronted my mother in the kitchen. "Who is he?" I asked quietly, holding up the document. The color drained from her face. For a second, I saw fear in her eyes, then anger. "You had no right touching that," she snapped. "No," I whispered through tears. "You had no right lying to me my whole life." My father walked in and froze when he saw the paper. The silence felt unbearable. Finally, my mother looked away and muttered, "Your real father was a soldier." I stared at her, completely broken. "So that's why you hate my military career," I whispered, "because every time you look at me, you see him." Nobody answered. That silence told me everything. But what destroyed me most was learning they blamed my real father for ruining their lives. My mother said he chose duty over family. She called him selfish, reckless. Yet somehow I felt proud hearing he had served. For the first time in years, I understood myself, my strength, my courage, my need to protect others. It came from him. And suddenly, I stopped feeling ashamed of who I was. Until everything changed again. 2 days later, an officer from my military unit arrived at my parents' house carrying documents and medals connected to my biological father's service. And the moment my family learned the truth about the man they spent years insulting, their entire world shattered. The officer stood in our living room while my parents stared nervously. "I'm here regarding Captain Daniel Hayes," he said calmly. My mother nearly dropped her coffee cup. That was my biological father's name. The officer looked at me kindly before continuing. "Your father saved multiple soldiers during an overseas attack. His actions protected dozens of lives." I felt tears burn my eyes. But then the officer said something that changed everything forever. He was also secretly sending financial support to this family before his death. My father's face turned pale. "What?" I whispered. The officer opened an old file filled with records, letters, and bank statements. For years, my biological father had supported my mother and begged to be a part of my life. But after he died, the benefits and financial support continued coming to our family, and my parents had hidden it from me. All those years they called me an outsider, while secretly living off the sacrifices of the man whose blood ran through my veins. I looked at my mother in disbelief. "You hated him, but you still took everything he left behind?" She burst into tears, but for once I didn't feel guilty watching her cry. Because whole my life, they made me feel unwanted for carrying the same courage they benefited from in silence. My father tried speaking. "We only wanted peace." "No," I interrupted softly. "You wanted control." The silence fell silent again. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid anymore. A week later, I moved out completely. I rented a small apartment near my base and started over. Slowly, the pain inside me became strength instead of shame. I framed my biological father's medals beside my own. Every morning, I looked at them and remembered that being strong was never something to apologize for. Months later, my mother called me crying. "We miss you," she whispered. But the truth was, they only missed the version of me who stayed silent, and that girl no longer existed. I forgave them eventually, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. Sometimes family is the people who see your worth without asking you to shrink yourself first. And as I stood in uniform one final time before deployment, I smiled quietly through tears. Because after years of feeling like an outsider, I finally understood who I truly was.